So good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Alkadhi, and if you can't hear, just tell me to raise my voice, and I'll start shouting. So my name is Alkadhi. I'm an Iraqi-born artist. I live and work in New York City. I'd like to start by thanking the Doris Duke Foundation for Islamic Arts for so very generously hosting me here in beautiful Hawaii and amazing Shangri-La. So thank you, Deborah. Where's Deborah? There's Deborah. And thank you, Carol. I said thank you, Deborah, and thank you, Carol. And I'd like to thank Intersections and the University of Hawaii for arranging this evening and for introducing me to so many of you, which was a delight for me. So thank you for your hospitality. Tonight I'm going to share with you a topic that has been both directly and indirectly the focus of my work as a visual artist, as a painter for the last few years. The topic is belonging and cultural identity. Belonging and cultural identity. It's a topic, it's a complex and broad topic, but it's especially interesting to be discussed here in the United States, where most of us come from different cultural backgrounds. It's particularly interesting to be discussed via art. As you know, art adds its own unique layer and facet to any discussion. What I'm about to share with you tonight is my own quest to belong as depicted through my work. It's a sort of a journey through image. The journey starts with identifying the emotional space regarding the topic of belonging. And the diptych behind me, I think, says it all. It shows the immigrant behind the flag of his homeland, his home of origin, and the second panel of him behind the flag of his new home, his adoptive home. In this case, in the United States. Here it's the flag of Iraq. In both cases, this individual feels inability to belong. He is neither able to separate from where he comes from, nor is he able to completely assimilate where he is today. This individual is in a sort of cultural identity, in crisis, if you like, a sort of cultural purgatory, if you like. This diptych is from a series on the topic of belonging and cultural identity. The series is titled Held by a Thread. Held by a Thread. This is another work from that same series. It's called State of Not Belonging. State of Not Belonging. Notice the band on his neck, the collar on his neck. It's as if to say that we can never truly be free if we do not truly feel that we belong, if we not truly feel belonging. The images from the Abu Ghraib prison is really what caused my work to shift to a more political and social direction. It's really what caused my work to focus on the human condition under political and social hardships. Here's a short video on the series that I created as a reaction to the Abu Ghraib images. The series is titled Father of No One's Son. Father of No One's Son. And this is just a short video clip.
The
figures have the symbols of the Iraqi flag superposed on them with calligraphy. It's the way I see the political situation in Iraq today, and the result was the 3 paintings in the series. Those pictures rocked me in a bad way. Those pictures, it just showed how evil war is. You just put the work out there, you put what you're feeling out there, and you put it on the canvas, and it's up to the viewer to have to make up their mind. So it's important to note that throughout my work, I seek not to criticize or point the finger of blame to any party whatsoever. I find that unproductive. As a matter of fact, I find it destructive. I simply seek to bring topics that are important to me and hope to bridge gap and further understandings. You know, in a country like the United States, where we pride ourselves on freedom of speech, what better thing to do is but to speak. And of course, in my case, what better thing to do is but to paint. In 2008, I created a series. I called it Casualty Unreported. Casualty Unreported. And this is called Coffin 2, and that one is Coffin 3. That's Coffin 2 and Coffin 3. In that year, there were reports of numerous unidentified bodies scattered in the streets of Iraq and floating in the Tigris and the Euphrates. With this series, I wanted to bring, I wanted to acknowledge their passing, even though their individual stories may never be told. And I want to bring notice to those who did not receive the proper burial ceremony that we're all entitled to, simply because we're human. Here's another work from that same series. I'll give you a second with it. As of today, the number of casualties from the war in Iraq is a disputed 150 to 300,000. As an Iraqi living in the United States, I find people approach me with hunger for answers about the Middle East. They want to know about the politics of the Middle East. They want to know about the religions of the Middle East. They want to know about the culture of the Middle East. The answers they seek are different from the emotionally detached coverage that we receive from the news media. People want to know about other people's trials and tribulations. Human beings seek point of identification with their fellow humans. I believe art can express these personal feelings and these emotions. The role of the artist in times of war, historian Howard Zinn once wrote, is to go beyond and escape what is handed down by the government or what is said in the media. I felt an obligation not only to express the feelings and the thoughts of my friends and families in Iraq, but also to help my newfound family and friends here in the United States to better understand the happenings of the Middle East. I created a series regarding the war in Iraq that expresses the feelings and the emotions of Iraqis regarding post-occupation Iraq. I call the series I Am Baghdad. Here's another video on that series. The video is created by fosterchannel.com. We have to give credit.
بغداد والشعراء
ولكل مما عملوا درجات
ذهب الزمان وضوءه العطر
وأن ذلك
يا
لآية
ألف ليلة يا
للمؤمنين.
مكملة
ذهب
الأعراس.
الزمان وضوءه العطر.
These paintings are close-up shots.
يا ألف ليلة عراق يا مكملة الأعراس.
Of a group of people from Baghdad.
بغداد الشعراء والصور. بغداد.
They come from various socio-economical, political, cultural backgrounds. وإن ذلك لآية
ذهب
للمؤمنين.
الزمان وضوءه العطر.
I imagine them being interviewed to express their feelings about post-occupation Iraq. The calligraphy that is superimposed on their faces conveys the way they feel about their circumstances.
يا ألف ليلة مما عملوا درجات الأعراس وأن ذلك لآية للمؤمنين. وطن حرية.
It's up to the viewer to interpret what they're saying and how they feel about their situation.
بغداد عراق حرية.
This is another series on the war. This series is called Widow Nation. The series is depicts the mothers of those who have lost their lives in the war. Every one of these women, as much a victim as the portrait of the loved one she holds in her hand. With this series, I wish to acknowledge their grief, their mourning, and their loss. I wish to acknowledge their hardships. This particular painting, titled the Pieta, obviously after Michelangelo's Pieta, it shows the Iraqi mother in her traditional robes, holding a photograph of her dead son. Behind her is the Islamic floral pattern that is typical of the holy shrines in the cities of Najaf and Karbala in the south of Iraq. The photograph of the victim, of the deceased, is an actual person, is an actual victim. I negatived the image to show a sense of absence, but more so as a way of respecting the privacy of the individual. In his particular case, he was a translator for the American troops in the city of Mosul, north of Iraq. Al-Qaeda got hold of him and they beheaded him on tape. This image was taken from a still from that tape seconds before his beheading. You know, painting is very therapeutic for me. It really helps me deal with those issues. So it's not just about telling the story or presenting it. But in some cases, I still get chills every time I look at it. And this is one of those cases. Here's another work from that same series. I'll give you a second with it. A couple of years back, there was a dispute, a debate in New York City about the construction of an Islamic Cultural Center a few blocks away from Ground Zero. The debate was hot. The debate was loud. There were many people sympathetic and for it. There were many people against it. The events led me to create a series I call Islam International. The purpose of the series is to show the emotional space of the global Muslim, of the Muslim immigrant, and his or her place as a citizen in a secular Western society. This particular work here represents the Muslim American. The faith of Islam is depicted by the white on green lettering that reads, "There is only one God, there is but one God." This person owes allegiance to the American flag, the American history, the all-American hero, and as depicted in George Washington. With the events at hand, this individual feels torn between his faith and his allegiance to his country. Again, this is another person who feels in a place of cultural purgatory. I like that word. This is the second time I use it. This is the British Muslim, and you can see the eyes of the individual peering through a cutout of the head of Queen Elizabeth II, which I chose as the cultural symbol for the United Kingdom. Again, it shows the cohabitation of the faith of Islam and the Western society. This is the French counterpart, and I chose the almighty croissant as I hope there are no French people here, as a representative as the cultural representative of France. I purposefully wanted humor and tongue-in-cheek in this because sometimes it helps ease the topic, and especially a sensitive topic like this, into the debate, table of debate. Many in the West and many non-Muslims have questioned the Islamic veil and its place and in our global society today. They argue its negative implications on women's rights and freedoms. In all my work, again, I seek not to defend nor attack. I simply seek to present the topic. And in this case, I urge the viewer to examine all the factors that led to the establishment of the veil as an important custom in the world of Islam, as an important custom of the Middle East. Look into all the historical, political, cultural, religious, geographical, economics that actually led to the establishment of this custom, but more importantly, the survival of this custom throughout the ages until today. Now, after you do so, if you still feel criticism is in order, then you've arrived to this point through educated analysis versus simply making a criticism from the point of contrast alone. Well, in plain English, what I'm trying to say here is it's easy to point at unfamiliar habits, in other cultures and say, well, that's strange, that's weird. But all you need to do is just go a little bit under the surface and see why this happened. You will find many reasons. And by doing so, I believe that communication between cultures will be facilitated. And I believe that understanding will happen. And just, if not, at least you say, I was fair in my analysis. I actually looked into it deeper. The reference to the skeletons here, to the X-rayed skeletons, is to say that the veil to us may seem like an easily discardable garment. It's a piece of cloth. Why can't they take it? But to that culture, it's an inherent part of their psychological and their cultural make. It's structural to them. Therefore, I titled this series Structure. There is throughout all the work that I've shown you, there is a common thread. There's a single common thread, I believe. And that is the need to tell a story, the need to tell a story. Up to this point, everything I've done serves the story, and the creative process follows the story. The compositions, the colors, the content, all follows the story. In 2011, I created a series. I called it Storyteller. The series is about the importance of passing on what we believe in to others. It's about the importance of keeping traditions alive. When I say keeping traditions alive, I don't mean blindly and stubbornly holding on to the past, rather to question the essence and the value of these traditions and allow them to adapt to our growth as individuals and as a society at large. One of the ways I believe we can allow traditions to progress and adapt is by questioning these traditions, questioning ourselves, questioning society, questioning the establishment. Sometimes the questions are polite and diplomatic, like we do in a classroom or like we're going to do in the Q&A after this. Other times, we question unreservedly and passionately because that's how we feel, like we do in protests and in rallies. He's not interested in being polite. He really wants to know what's going on. The painting is titled, well, what the fuck does it mean? And he really means it, and he wants an answer. In 2012, for a solo I had in New York, something shifted. With this body of work, for the first time in a long time, the narrative did not dictate the creative process, rather they happened simultaneously. The result was a bunch of stories within one series, a number of stories within one series. Some of those stories were resurrected from previous series. There were obviously stories that were not satisfied within me, so I had to tell them in a different way, in a new way. Like this one, it's titled Sleeping Beauties, Sleeping Beauties. It's about the casualties of war. I've said that one before. This work here is titled I Used to Be King, I Used to Be King. It's about leaving home and trying to find belonging elsewhere. I guess I've said that one before too. This work is titled Spring. It's actually a 4 feet by 18-foot mural, this is a nice representation of it. It's almost true to scale. The work is about the current political changes that have been happening in the Middle East. It's about the revolutions that have been happening in the Middle East. I wanted to do something to support the men and women of the Middle East who are challenging the establishment and challenging the status quo. All the people from Egypt and Tunisia, Libya, and the people of Syria who are dying as we speak. You know, war is happening in Syria up to this point. Okay, so I'm going to digress just for a second and show you this. This is the last work I finished before I came here. And the reason I'm showing it's from a new series that I just started. It's the first work from that series. But the reason I included it is just to show you the evolution and the change in the thinking process and the feeling process that governs the creative process. In this work, there are more than 2 stories, which is new to me. Here it is. I went from the story being the dictator and saying it all, and now to the story taking a back seat, and the creative process is becoming the narrator in its own, which is something that I'm pleased with for a change, because it's a democracy here, and we can't allow any process to stay there too long. So now the creative process is leading. So what have I learned from this work that I've done and from this journey that I shared with you? Regarding belonging, I believe that the truest state of belonging is to be at peace with where I am, where we are at this point of the journey, which is, you know, an organic and an ever-changing place in its own right. You know, nobody knows where we're heading tomorrow, but chances are we will progress if we are at peace with where we are today, and more importantly, if we are at peace with where we came from, where we started. And with this, I'd like to thank you for being here, and please ask as many questions as possible. The doors are locked, so unless you ask, you're not going anywhere.
I think we can take some questions, and yeah, would you mind if I started with one?
Of course.
You were talking about your need to, or your desire to communicate with people through your work. You use a lot of text, and text, you know, language often signifies communication. Yet, as someone who doesn't speak Arabic, I am at a loss for what those words mean, for what that story is. Can you just talk a little bit about that? How, you know, this desire for you to communicate is kind of blocked by the translation issue in the work.
Well, I'm very happy that you are blocked and you're not being able to read it, because that's the intention. The reason I use calligraphy in my work is because the painted words give the impression or the notion that there is a story being told, there is something being said. What it says is really of little importance. This is not literal communication. It's not meant to be propaganda, even though sometimes it teeters at propaganda, I admit. But it's not meant to direct you any way or another. Besides, I created all these works here, so mainly my immediate audience were Americans and Europeans. That's where the work started, and then it went to the Middle East. So the intention for it was never to be read. As a matter of fact, Arabic-speaking people cannot read it either. The calligraphy is so mangled together, it's not meant to actually literally read. It's just meant to say, there is something here, and I can't read it because there is lots of question marks, in which I would like to remain versus saying I'm clear and I'm making a statement. Then it becomes a banner, and I avoid the banner.
Thank you.
Now you can leave, and anybody else who has any questions, stay.
No, there's a question back here.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if
Sorry, can you just go a little bit louder?
Well, you guys can come sit up here.
No, or I can go. We don't embarrass anybody. Put them on the spot. What is it? Sorry. Go ahead.
So you were referring to your stories and narratives. I wasn't sure if you mentioned that. Are they your stories, like these kind of stories that you build upon in your mind, or are they as narratives, or are they conversations taken with actual individuals that you make record conversation in a text? Is it a recorded text that you kind of layer and compound and mix with your own ideas, or is it just completely your?
Okay, it's both. The question was, are these my stories or stories that I were inspired by other people, or is it the comeback? It's actually all of the above. It depends on the series. The I Am Baghdad series that I showed you, I actually spoke with a group of Iraqis, and I chose to create a series of the same phase with the same emotion. Each one, the calligraphy and the way it's laid out would depict the response and emotions of the different people I actually spoke with. Others were stories that I read or in a newspaper, one of the series that's not shown here, which is about the Iraqi refugees in Syria and their hardships. It was the series that I created, and I forgot the title of my own series. It is Slowly to Deconstruct. And I read the article, and I went halfway through the article. I was so moved by it that I actually didn't finish it, but I created 3 paintings based on it. So it's really, but it's generally, I think, because I grew up in Baghdad, because I grew up in Iraq, and I witnessed war, and I witnessed dictatorship, I react to the stories in a very similar way. They disturb me, and right away I find that I have to get it out, to paint it in one way or another. Does that answer it? Excellent. Thank you. Yes.
Hi. I'm just wondering, a lot of what you're talking about deals with identity and belonging and all these things. And I guess you're talking about how painting is a therapy for you. It's very therapeutic. In your work being received in both in your native born and in American, do you, I guess, feel either more alienated or more belonging from the reception of your work since then?
No, it's more belonging.
Yeah, can you repeat the question?
Oh, I'm sorry. Do I feel, since I show my work in my native country and here in the United States, has that helped with my belonging and identity issues, or has that pushed me in the background and segregated me? So is that the question?
Yeah.
And I know that's the wonderful thing about art, and that's the privilege of doing art, is that it's an internal therapy. You deal with it, and for me, I've come to see that a great deal of it is, starting with me, just like I said. You sort with it, and once you sort with it, you're okay. It's always a dialogue with the outside world, but I really believe if you start with yourself and you're okay, you can actually find your way. So doing this work is amazing for me because I get to express myself and tell my stories and sort through my manure, and then I get to make a living out of it, and then a career out of it, and all these facets come out of this. So it's a big privilege. Yeah. Yes.
Kind of following on that, do you find your work received very differently in Iraq than the U.S.? And if so, in what ways do you find the reception or reactions to it different?
Honestly, I don't know if I'm as It's interesting. Iraq itself, my homeland, I don't know if I am that known there. I'm more known in other parts of the Middle East. Iraq is still really struggling with the war environment. I don't think I've reached them in that way. The art scene I do know is climbing in Iraq, and they're opening up. But I don't know, so it's the Middle East in general, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Egypt, Tunisia, I think I've had audience there, Jordan, Lebanon, and United States, you know, and then some places in Europe. It's interesting. Here there is, there is a more, because of the war, I feel people want to know. I said that previously, that people want to know, and they want to know different. Okay, you're the horse, from the horse's mouth, really what's going on. And so the reaction to that is basically, okay, this is going to help us, give us more information. Europe is a little bit different because the Middle Eastern references there is slightly different. And the Middle East, it's also different because then they say, okay, this is more of the same of what we believe in. That's my thinking process on how they're actually receiving it. I guess you have to ask one of them. Yes.
How old were you when you moved to the United States?
It's been 10, 11 years since I moved to the United States.
And have you been back to Iraq?
No. I've left Iraq about 20 years ago, after the first Gulf War. And then I've been a gypsy, and I jumped all over the place, and then I came to the United States for grad school. Yes?
You have contact.
Yes.
Well, let me ask you a very basic question that probably is in the minds of many Americans, because we've been told Iraq is below radar screen right now. It's not covered in American media very much. Obama pledged to end our involvement there, withdraw our troops. So I was wondering, from your perspective and what you hear from Iraqis, what has the American multi-year involvement, hundreds of billions of dollars spent, hundreds of thousands of lives, what has been the result from the Iraqi perspective?
As a politician, and a politician I am not.
The people.
Go ahead, the people?
The people of Iraq. What do you think they feel about what the result is?
You know what? Strangely enough, I tell you something. I don't feel entitled to speak on their behalf anymore because I've been out so long.
I'm not asking you, I'm saying from what you hear.
Oh, from what I hear, it's really varying. I show you the I Am Baghdad series, and honestly, the people I spoke with, some of them were for the occupation. Some of them were for the invasion, believe it or not. Others were against it. Others were angry. Some were hopeful for the future. It varied, and again, the media gives us a very black and white story, but it's never black and white. It really depends on who, where, what, and when. I apologize, I don't know if I can answer your question just because it's interesting to me that, I don't know if I don't want to say anything that might give you an answer that you will take with you because I'm not a politician. And I don't know if that's a place I want to go with. At the end of the day, I am an artist. I do, within the context of my art is political, I agree. But I really want it to be about the emotions, the human stories, versus to be about the actual facts. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. What's sad is, after history is written, it's about events and years and titles. But really what's lost is the human stories, the little story of the little people. That's lost, the people who lose, the people who are grieving, the people who are happy, that's all gone. We don't do that. We love big red titles. This means this, and this is what covers it. And in 20, 30 years' time, it will be just that. The events of Iraq will be just a title. Just like, for example, the Vietnam War is now. Yes, It comes along with lots of, trauma associated, but we don't hear as much of the individual stories unless artists depict them in movies and in books and in artwork. So again, I'm...
Is that a hand back here?
I am coming to you. Yes.
More of the figure. And then as well as the use, I could tell underneath there was some of this coming through of these Da Vinci drawings as well. Some of this use of the drawings based on the notebooks. And then what was your interest in that and the figure as well? Like, is that a relationship that you're learning drastically?
So Carl was asking is the shift from the portraits, the faces, and then using the figures and then the Da Vinci references with the embryos. Really, again, to me, in the beginning, up till last year, it was all about the story. So I get the story, and then I tailor everything to suit it. So either if it's the portraits or the figures, so the creative process itself is secondary. So I find something that best represents that. With the I Am Baghdad series, with the portraits, which are actually not meant to be portraits, they're just meant to show an Iraqi, so I chose my face.
Right.
So I felt that is, I wanted it to be a very tight shot that could be almost as an interview. We sit the person, go camera very close, and speak. And so whatever you do on the painting is that. And then when I did the coffins, I did a little body in a shroud, I stood it up, for example. It's just what worked in the mind. I tried to be as less literal as possible.
But so the Da Vinci stuff, is that coming out of books that you have on hand in your studio and you're like, oh, I'm interested in this?
I'm always looking at stuff. I'm always looking at stuff. And I get bored very quickly, by the way. So I do something, and then once I technically feel that, okay, I don't have a challenge. If I don't have, if I am not struggling and losing sleep, I am not happy. What do you call that? Is that masochism? Sadism? Masochism? Yeah, that's it. If I don't put that, maybe it's because I come from Iraq and all of that. If I don't do that to myself, I'm not happy. So I'm always looking for new ways to find expression, and I think that's why the work is always going from one place to another.
With that, can you talk a little bit about your use of the stitch and scale and this pattern a little bit in this work?
Okay, the pattern is an actual form of calligraphy, Islamic calligraphy. It's called the Kufic script, the geometric Kufic script. And for those of you who are going to be in Professor, I blacked out, in Reem's class, she would be able to tell you about that because she also uses it in her work. It's a form of Islamic script. It's a geometric Kufic script, and again, I use it as depiction, as reference to culture. The stitch, I wanted the literal metaphor of, I'm hanging by a thread. So it's that's very, and of course, it was interesting to me that I am assaulting the canvas. You finish the canvas and I'm going through a needle through it, and that was new to me. But I wanted the reference, the literal reference to the whole thing is just so fragile as it's hanging there. Does that answer it?
Yes, and a little bit about your use of color.
Well, here again, it's really all about the story. The colors from the flags, Iraqi flag, American flag, and the portrait was not have much color to it. I wanted to go as to subtract as much as possible and go as basic as possible. Then, and that was my way of thinking. Now it's a little bit different. Oh, thank you for being here. Thank you.